we'll stick with this for now. So let's get started. First and foremost, we gotta see what the trick looks like. There's a bunch of hovers these days. We got the bomb Morth hover. We got this one, and then we got the fall damage hover. This is the spicy hover. It's named that way because of how we damage ourselves to start hovering. So let's give it one run through, and then we'll start talking about stuff in more detail. Alrighty, so that is the flame hover and completion. That's what we're going to be looking at. So, before we get into... see you later, Dean. Before we get into talking about the specifics of the trick, I want to, first of all, address some things that you need to know before even attempting it. First and foremost, you need to know how to two-hand mash. And, you know, as much as I could talk about two-hand mashing, we could sit here all day and talk about two-hand mashing. I want to kind of keep things focused on the hover itself. So we'll just refer you to Kiba's mashing tutorial. It covers two-hand mashing in the beginning, and then he actually talks about the fall damage hover at the end. Link in the description. Yeah, it will be as well. But you need to know how to two-hand mash. You need to be able to do it comfortably. You can technically get away with one-hand mashing, but we're going to talk about later why you probably don't want to do that because of, well, you'll see. Basically, you want to be able to mash as fast as possible, as easily as possible. So let's talk about the first Morth. I gotta back up a little bit. It's frozen because it's a video, by the way. I don't know if you caught that. Alright. So, before anything, you want to stab the left Morth, right? Hold on, let me scoot back a little bit here. There's three Morths, right? There's the top Morth, the left Morth, and the right Morth. If there are three Morths on the ground, you want to stab the left Morth. And I will explain at the end why. I was going to do it now, but frankly, I don't think a lot of people care. It's not important to know why. But just based on giving yourself the best odds of getting it without having to reset the Morths, and giving yourself the most opportunity for backups, you want to kill the left Morth. So we hop out of the pot. Even though we could stab the top Morth, we're going to walk around and get the left Morth. And then we need a visual cue for the stab. So what we're doing here is we're killing the Morth at the same time that he attaches to us. Because we're setting the flag for the Morth to be dead to Link's sword. That's the cue for him to drop heart when we kill him with the bow and arrow. So to do that, we need a visual cue to know how close we are to the Morth. You can use a multitude of things. Kiba, I think, uses this little spike down here. I'm going to be talking about this spike right here. So you're going to go into first-person camera, and you're going to try to get him aligned with the center of the screen. There's a couple of ways you can do this. He's got this, I don't know, his iris, I guess, and this top spike here. Both of those are lined up with the middle of the screen. It doesn't have to be exact, but like my monitor has a brand name on the bottom in the middle. So I just use that to kind of get them aligned. And then we're going to be using this spike to indicate how far forward we need to walk. So there's this bottom part. You can see it's like kind of a triangle shape. There's this bottom part here where it connects to his body. And then there's this entire top line here. So that's the two cues that I use. So I'm going to be walking forward. And using the bottom of my screen, I want the bottom little corner here to be off the screen, but I want the top line to be on my screen. So you see the bottom corner just went off, but the top line is still on. I'm going to move a little more forward just to be safe. We don't want to move too far forward, because even if he doesn't attach to you immediately, it is possible that he can attach to you while you're stepping forward with the stab. So we need him to be far enough back, but we also need him to be close enough, obviously, so that both happen at the same time. If we're not close enough for him to attach, then he'll just die. So that looks about good. So you can see my camera is going to pan out. The inputs for this stab is you want to hold ZL to get out of first person, and then at the same time you need to hold forward and B. Depending on how you hold the analog stick, Link will do a different slash with his sword. We want to hold forward for him to stab forward. Not only does that hit forward and will hit the Morth, but Link also takes a little step. So he'll walk into the Morth, because it's not attached to him right now. He's just going to walk into it. So I'm holding ZL, and then right after holding ZL, I'm going to press forward and B at the same time. There you go. And the visual cue, it's pretty easy to tell. Basically, there's the large red flash and the death sound, so you know that you hit him. But you can see he's also attached to me, and he's following me. So that's how you get the Morth on you. That's the stab. Now we need to roll to get him off of us. And there's a couple different places you could stand. You're going to see that I go like directly behind the pot here. Technically speaking, you could be in kind of an arc around the pot. We'll talk about this too later because I have a better picture of it. But you can stand on the sides of the pot, you can stand directly behind the pot, and you can kind of be anywhere in between them. And because of the way the pot's collision works, you'll mostly be fine. I stand in the middle most of the time, just because it kind of evens out the chances. He could roll either way, so I want to be as far from both edges as possible. So that's why I'm in the middle. And you're going to see that I wait a little bit. You don't need to wait. Here's the thing about waiting, is that as you wait... Actually, let me back up so you can see it actually happening. Link's going to stand here, and the Morth's going to be jumping around on different parts of his body. You see that? There has been some debate about whether or not the Morth's position on your body is... or whether... how the Morth moves when you roll, whether or not that's dependent on where he is on your body. It's probably not, but it seems like when he's on your legs or when he's on your arms, he has a chance to roll toward you. And also, if you do a dry roll instead of a full roll, he has a chance to roll towards you. So I try to minimize the chances. Again, we don't know for sure. It's probably not. The tests that we've done indicate that it's not important. But, you know, just kind of giving myself the best chance here. I wait a little bit for him to be on my torso. And the pattern that he follows after you stab him is consistent. So he'll always end up on my torso at the same time. Explain a dry roll? Oh, yeah. So a dry roll... let me play the video so you can see. So what I do is I walk forward a little bit. Oh, I do too. I walk forward a little bit, and then I roll. A dry roll is when you either roll from a standing position, Or no, it's when you roll from a standing position, basically. So if you don't have a running start, you'll do a dry roll. You can do that by holding ZL and tapping A to roll, or you can roll immediately after pressing up. So we want to walk a little bit forward before we roll. And that's just to make sure... Again, this is like... It's so hard to tell these things, we can't know for sure. But it just seems, based on the patterns that we've observed, that dry rolls are more likely to make the Morth roll in a way that we don't want him to. We want him ideally to roll straight back toward that platform that we're trying to get him up to. So, if we can avoid him rolling toward us, like if he rolls toward the camera right now, there's nothing we can do. He's just going to fall off the platform because of how close we are. And we don't really want him to run straight to either side either. We can catch him, but it makes it much slower to get him to the platform. So ideally we want him to run toward the platform up there where we go into Ganon. And this is what you'll hear people talk about a lot with Morth RNG. With this hover, this is actually the largest piece of RNG, is whether or not you can... Where the Morth rolls. And we'll talk about later how where it rolls can influence later parts of the trick. But suffice to say right now, you just want him to roll toward that platform, and you want to catch him. Let me make sure. I actually don't remember what splits I have. Okay, yeah. We're going to talk about the leaf now. So, he rolls, and we blow the leaf. You have to... let me show it. You have to be quick with the leaf, right? He's going to fall off really quickly. So, you want to be facing that direction as quickly as possible. And to do that, we need what's called an instant turnaround. So, I'm going to do play-by-play here. Regardless of where the Morth lands, we need an instant turnaround. So you can see in one frame I went... Oh, there it is. Turning a different direction. I'm actually going to pull up the game here so I can talk about that. So when Link's walking, or well, not when he's walking, but just in normal gameplay, there's kind of two ways you can turn. So if I turn to the side, he kind of takes a minute to start up. You see that? You know, it takes a little bit for him to turn around. Even if I'm ahead, he kind of has to catch up with me. But if I turn exactly around, he's instantly facing that direction. And so if I wanted to walk up left, I wouldn't hold up left. You see how he took a minute to turn around and then start running? I would hold all the way up to get him to do an instant turnaround, and then I would adjust to walk to the left. Like that. That wasn't even the best example. But yeah, you can see this is faster. Now one frame closer to 4. Yeah, but it's the visual is one frame. Basically, he's not slowly turning. He goes from facing one way to facing the other way. That's why we call it instant turnaround. See that? Although I guess it probably does take multiple. It does look kind of smooth. You're probably right, Index. Also, Zusts, welcome. I apologize to anybody who is in chat right now. We're not going to be interacting too much unless we have questions. But that's instant turnaround. You definitely want to do that when you're trying to blow the Morth, because you want to be able to catch him in time. So we roll, we react to which way he's going, and then we use the leaf to blow him up in the air. At this point, as long as you have one Morth and one pot, you can relax a little bit, because the Morth is going to take forever to fall. I blow him a second time just to give me extra time to move and position myself. But this is pretty self-explanatory. He's up in the air. Every time he gets about the same height as Link, we're going to blow. And then right there, that's... You want to be positioning yourself, so we're kind of following the Morth as he gets closer to the platform. The thing about blowing with the leaf is that you can see with... Whenever we do it... There's like the little white puff that comes out there. And it only goes a certain distance. You can see it stopped right there on the platform. It didn't actually reach all the way to the wall, I don't think. It might be large enough. Its collision is pretty large, but just in terms of the visual, we can see that it stops there. So, in order to... Because he's probably going to bump up against the wall. We need to follow him. We need to stay close enough to him so that we can keep moving him up. So we want to move ourselves toward this platform that I'm on. This one kind of in front of the platform here. So you want to keep blowing him. He clips through the bottom of the platform, so you just need to blow him high enough so that he clips. And then we need to position him on the platform. So to do that, I'm using this little fence here. You can see there's these pillars, which we're going to talk about. And then I'm going to call this a fence later when we talk about the Bowshot. But you can see through it, and you can see there's the Morth there. Sometimes it's a little hard to see him. You kind of have to follow him as you're blowing the leaf, so you know where he is. But I can see him there, and what I want to do is there's this little black piece at the bottom of every one of the columns. And it doesn't matter which side the Morth is on. This will work from both sides, but we need to move the second Morth to accommodate for that. So he's closer to this side, and Link is closer to this side. So I'm going to move him on this side. And I want him to be in the corner that is formed by this fence and this little bottom part. And to do that, I want to walk around a little bit. Now that we've blown the Morth with the leaf, you can see the other two Morths. Well, you can't really see it, but you might have been able to tell that the other two Morths haven't been following me. Now that I've blown this Morth with the leaf, he's going to follow me. He's going to try to chase me, and he's going to try to attach to me. So I'm just going to run around a little bit. He's going to try to run straight at me, and he's going to get pushed by the wall. And once I realize he's in the corner, I'm going to stop moving. I'm actually going to keep track of the time here. I do want to show you something that can happen. A couple things that can happen if you're unlucky with the Morth position. So, excuse the drawing cut here. Whoa, 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 whoa. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Why is it fast? Whoa, whoa, whoa. Give me 1 sec. Sorry about that. That's why. The same as my oh no, how am I gonna do this? I think it's fine. Is this good now? Yeah, it is. Okay. So sometimes when you blow the Morth, he'll go up, and you might not have been able to see it. I'm gonna show it one more time, but he actually, because we're clipping him underneath, he actually gets stuck in the pedestal at the bottom of the column. So watch very carefully. The orange spikes are kind of the easiest way to see him. So you can see he goes up, and now he's in there. And occasionally he'll clip back out the other way. But in this case, oh geez, he comes out this side, right? The side that we don't want him to be of this fence. He's over here. If he runs toward us more, he's going to fall off. I did some weird camera business here because I was facing backwards and I didn't want to move. But the response is to get him to chase you and then immediately use the leaf to pick him up. Because he's going to run off and he's going to fall. So we have to catch him. So you see right there. I'm blowing the leaf preemptively because he falls pretty fast. And then I'm also showing a second thing that can happen. Obviously you wouldn't set it up like this, but occasionally he'll land on the very edge. And you don't know for sure if you're going to be able to get him behind the little bottom part of the column. So one thing I like to do is do a diagonal roll. So if I just roll straight toward him, he's going to run straight at me, and there's a chance that he's going to catch the collision in such a way that he falls off to the left. And we don't want him to fall off to the left because then we have to fix him. So I roll diagonally. You can see I'm kind of going toward this way. The Morth is going to try to meet me. So instead of running straight at me, he's going to kind of run at an angle. And you can see that gets him stuck behind the pedestal. And now I can fix him. So just a little thing. The positioning is awkward sometimes, but for those of you coming from the fall damage hover, I hope you recognize that this is like extremely lenient. The problem with the fall damage hover is that wherever the Morth is on the platform, that's where he's going to be, because you can't really move him or else he's going to fall off. But pretty much any position on the platform can still end up working with this. So let's go ahead and go back. I believe it was here. We've just set up the Morth. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything. You're going to notice that I start sidestepping, or sidewalking. I don't really know what you call it. This little movement. I'm holding ZL and then I'm holding to the side. And there's a reason we do that. We talked about earlier how once you blow the Morth, or disrupt it in some way, he's going to start following you if you move. Or more, I should be specific about the wording because it's something we're going to talk about. If you are over a certain positive speed, the Morth will start chasing you. It just so happens that if you're sidestepping, you're under that speed, but you're still moving pretty quickly. So it's a pretty reliable way to make sure that you're walking slow enough. So once we get the Morth where we want him, we don't want him to move anymore, which means we don't want him to chase us anymore. So we're going to be sidestepping everywhere now. Pretty much. You'll see when we start using the pot that we're going to mix it up a little bit. Oh, I forgot to. That's my bad. We're going to mix it up a little bit, but just keep in mind that you want to walk slow. Now, I mentioned earlier that it's a certain positive speed that they start chasing you. And for those of you familiar with this game, you might recognize a loophole there. Yes, you can technically item slide everywhere. You could, if you were capable enough and confident enough in your item slides, you could technically slide everywhere. And it's fast, and that's a decent thing to do. It's probably what TAS would do. The problem is that to start an item slide, you have to walk forward. Well, actually, there's two problems. So yeah, that's one of them. You have to walk forward first, so the Morth's going to chase you a little bit. Either that, or you have to start your item slide with a very small amount of forward speed. And so when you actually hold ESS down, you're going to build speed kind of slowly. So it's not as quick as it seems, basically. And these distances are pretty short. Like sidestepping over here doesn't take that long. But also another problem, and arguably the reason most people don't do it, these, I don't know what you'd call them, catwalks, maybe? The platforms, these thinner platforms that we're maneuvering on, they're pretty small. And if you fall off of this platform, good luck getting up without disrupting this Morth that you've set up, or doing it in any reasonable amount of time. And in any percent run, ideally you don't even break the warp pot at the beginning. So now you have to climb all the way back up, and doing that is going to get the Morth to move. You really, really don't want to fall. Not only does it waste a lot of time, but any setup that you've done is probably not going to last through you coming back up. So sidestepping is significantly safer. It's like barely slower because you don't have to pause and your speed buildup isn't small, and you know exactly where you're going to land. Or, well, not land, but you can see I'm kind of like, as I'm moving, I'm shimmying. Like, you can kind of hold up and down a little bit and still sidestep, if that makes any sense. Here, let me switch back to the game so I can show you what I mean. So if I'm sidestepping, I can hold perfect left or perfect right, but I can also, or well, that wasn't a good example, but I can also kind of hold up and down. You see how I'm still sidestepping? And most of these angles will still work. You don't want to push it. You don't want to get really close to holding up. I don't even know if this would work, because it's your total positive speed. The animation is a good cue for that. Yeah, I don't know the exact balance. I try to stay closer to the side than to up or down. But there is a bit of variation there, and that's what I mean when I'm saying that I'm positioning myself closer to the pot, is I'm holding up a little bit, because I know that if I keep walking sideways, I'm going to miss it. And this is a little confusing. I'm talking about the pot. I'm talking about this pot right here, not the big warp pot. But as you'll see in a minute here, we're going to, well, you already saw it. We're going to use this pot to move the Morth. So let's get into the second Morth. So the inputs for the pot, this is where, to preface this is the most annoying part of the trick for a lot of people, especially people that are new to the trick. I can personally say that I don't care about this anymore. It doesn't bother me, but that I vividly remember this being why I didn't want to learn this part of the trick, or why I didn't want to learn this trick. This was one of the things pushing me toward learning fall damage hover, is that I didn't want to move this Morth with the pot, because it is tedious and annoying. And I think at the heart of that is that the animations for the pot, or not animations, excuse me, the inputs for the pot can get confusing quickly. So it's just two basic inputs. You press A to pick it up, and you press ZR to put it down, and you just do that a bunch. The problem is that if you're already holding the pot and you press A, Link's going to throw the pot. and the pot's going to break. And now you either have to get a new pot, or if you don't have any more, then you have to go and reset the Morths in the room. Like, that's it. That's the end. You don't have a lot of leniency in this trick, as you'll find. We need 2 of the 3 Morths, and we need at least 1 pot. So, you know, if you mess something up, you now have to reset the room. That can be really annoying for practice. So what I would recommend for the inputs is think about it sort of like manual Super Swim, where instead of, or no, actually, I guess, yeah, instead of unpausing for a frame and then pause, it's better to think about it as a pause on pause, pause on pause, pause on pause. You want to think about this as setting down the pot, waiting a little bit, and then picking the pot back up. And then you adjust, set the pot down, pick it back up. And I would recommend that you start slow. I know it's tempting to be quick because this is a really slow part of the trick, but if you try to be too quick with your inputs and you're not familiar with it, then you're going to end up throwing the pot a lot. Related to something people learning would know. Well, I learned this last. I learned manual swim first, so I don't know. It's a different experience for everybody, but you get what I mean, hopefully. That the rhythm is put the pot down, pick the pot back up. Put the pot down, pick the pot back up. Start slow. We'll talk about mentality at the very end, but basically, to learn this trick, you need to not get frustrated with this trick, or else you're going to want to do fall damage hover, and that is a significantly harder hover. Now, to push the Morth with the pot, we have to be the right distance away from the Morth. And this is, I'm going to go back to the game here. We need a middle ground. So Link, when he puts down the pot, he puts it in front of him like that. I mean, that makes sense, obviously. But, you know, the collision with the Morth, if we want to move him forward, we have to keep in mind where the pot's going to land. Right? So with this Morth, I know where the pot's going to be. I know that this is close enough that when I set it down, he's going to move forward. And he kind of moved off to the side because of the way I was angled. You can think about it sort of like a billiards ball, where if the pot, you can see, if the pot came in at the angle that it did with the Morth would go off in that direction. Hopefully you recognize the billiards ball analogy here. That, you know, if, like, helps people to enter first person. Yeah, Al uses first person. You could do that too, like how we did. I unfortunately don't have a visual cue for that I can recommend, but again, this comes with feel. You could use the textures on the Morth to know how close you are to it, and then set it down and push it. That's one way to do it. That's an extra input, though, and that can get confusing. What I like to do, here's my middle ground here. Do I have a split for this? Yeah, I do. So what I like to do is sidestep as much as I can with the pot. And there's a couple reasons why. We mentioned sidestepping earlier as being a way to avoid moving the Morth that's up on the top platform. And during this whole thing, we need to be moving slow. If you're just walking forward, you have to be mindful of how fast you step forward. You can see in the video that every time I put down the pot, or rather every time I pick up the pot, when I move back toward the Morth, I'm moving really slow. You see that? And I'm kind of trying to get him off to the side, not just because the platform's there, but because I really like sidestepping for a couple reasons. First off, like we talked about, sidestepping won't move the Morth on the top, so you don't really have to worry as much. You know, if you accidentally slip and take a big step, you don't have to worry about the Morth jumping up there. Also, if you're stepping to the side, I can see how close the Morth is to me. You see how, like, you can literally see the pot in my hands and the Morth on the floor? I know that this is going to push him an okay distance. That's about how far we want him to go. So you can see that, like, just looking at my hands, right, you can see the pot up there compared to the Morth down there. They kind of overlap a little bit. I know the Morth is going to go off to the side. We do need to be careful, though. So we want to push him, excuse me, we want to push him pretty far, but I don't want to get too close to him. You can see if I put this down, it's going to be kind of like, it's overlapping with more than half the Morth. I think this will work. This should push the Morth into me. Yeah. This is a big no-no. To get the Morth off of you, you have to quick spin or you have to roll. And the quick spin will probably kill the Morth, and the roll will move the Morth that's up on the top platform. So this is really problematic. You want to avoid the Morth attaching to you during the entire process that you're moving him. These are the two annoying things that can happen, is that, like I said, you can throw the pot accidentally, or the Morth will attach to you, and now you're just kind of screwed, because you have one less Morth to work with. This camera's first person? It does, yeah, you can use first person camera. So, Index mentions, yeah, quick spin is the best option. It is in most situations. Sometimes it won't kill the Morth. I think that's dependent, that is actually dependent on its position on your body, I think. Because it's the hitbox of the sword, basically, is only a certain distance, so I think it's fair to assume that where he is on your body determines that. But you can see he jumps around a lot, so it's kind of hard to react. Usually I just quick spin and hope for the best if this happens. Let's see. So that this whole part, it's kind of unfortunate that this whole part is like really feel oriented. You just kind of have to get used to how far away you need to be to move the Morth a reasonable distance. But you can see that you do get a feel for it, right? Like, and as long as your movements between are consistent, you will get a feel for it. You can see here, I end up behind the fog in the pot, and it's really hard to see. But I'm still just moving my same amount. So I know confidently that the Morth is going to be where I want it to be. Excuse me. Alright. We need to talk about where this second Morth needs to be. So, there's no exact location. Here's the kind of the rules on this. So the Morth needs to be close enough to the edge so that when you shoot him, the knockback from taking damage will push you off the edge. If we don't fall off the edge, this trick will not work. We need to fall off the edge. We can't pull our sword out in time to do liftoff, so we have to just fall. So he needs to be close enough to this back edge that he'll push us off. But at the same time, he needs to be close enough to this edge so that Link can fit in this little space without the Morth attaching. The cue that I use, it's not really even a cue, it's just kind of, I don't know. You can sort of see it with the pot. Basically, there's the middle of this platform. I want the left part of the Morth's body, I want the left part of the Morth's body to, or well, it would be the right part on the other side. Basically, I want this furthest part of the Morth's body to be past the middle of this platform. And that indicates to me that he's far enough to the right that he'll push me off. And then pretty much anything in there will work for pushing me off. So then I just kind of visualize how much space I need to be able to fit myself in there. And that, again, this takes a little bit of practice. Just kind of walking up to Morths and seeing when they attach to you. That's something you could do if you are not familiar. But having that side of his body, like having this side of his body lined up with the middle is a good start. So now we need to move Link into position. What I do, there's a couple ways you could do this. So I hold ESS on my controller, like I just barely hold toward the Morth up on this platform, so that Link slowly rotates. That was kind of not far enough back. You see how he just kind of slowly rotates there. That's what I do. It's just to make sure that I don't move at all. I just barely hold any on the controller. Some people will back walk off this ledge and grab it, and then hand over hand kind of walk. Oh, here, let me show you. Get off me. Some people will back walk off this edge and then move like this and then get up. The reason I don't like doing that is some people do first person. Oh yeah, you could also rotate the camera with first person. That's probably honestly the best way to do it. The reason you'd want to do this is because it's, you know, this whole time that you're moving, you're definitely not going to attach to the Morth. But when you get up, you can kind of see that Link's feet aren't all the way back. Like, I could go much further back. Or not much further, but, like, a good amount back. Like, his feet can kind of even hang off a little bit. I don't know if you can see that very well. But he's further back. And sometimes if you moved your Morth too close to the edge, that can be the difference. Especially if you draw your bow. When you draw your bow, Link's hitbox kind of gets a little bit bigger. And so sometimes you'll be standing here and the Morth won't attach. You're like, alright, I'm ready. You draw the bow, and then he attaches to you while you're doing that. So I like to walk behind, so I have full control of the distance I am away from the Morth, just to make sure that I'm far enough away. Again, this is a feel thing. I really wish there was a better way to describe it. I would recommend just looking at the video and trying to copy it, because I think that's a good place to start. But you just kind of have to get used to it. The situation's going to be different every time. So we sidestep into place. I want to stand right behind... Well, okay. I don't actually know how much this matters. I asked about this one time, and I didn't get an answer from anybody, so I'm not sure that anyone knows. Where Link is standing relative to the Morth, right? Because the instinct is to have him in line. I don't know. If you were to draw a line from this top Morth to this Morth, you want Link to be along that line, right? You don't want him to be like way over here. Even if he's close enough to get damaged and pushed off, you want him to kind of be in line with this top Morth. That said, I usually stand along this kind of line behind the Morth. Like, I stand like right here, right behind him. I don't know how much that matters. I don't know how much that influences the angle that you slide off, or if it even does. But the variance is not that much. If you just kind of stand behind the Morth, you know, not biased off to either side, you should be fine. So it's at this point that we start the hover itself, finally. There's a lot to this. So there's different ways you can approach it. You might have noticed, if you've seen other people do the flame hover, this is probably where the way I do it is different from the way that other people do it. I go under the platform, and there's a couple reasons I do that. So here's the pros and cons. If you go over the platform, then you start higher. What going over the platform means is that as soon as you take the shot, you start mashing. You don't go under this at all. You start mashing right as you get pushed off, and you go up. The advantage to that is we'll talk about bow shots in a little bit here, but the idea is that your mashing is a little bit more lenient, right? You don't have to mash as fast to get to the same height, and you potentially have more opportunities to bow shot. We'll talk about that a little bit. The downside is that unless you are very good at switching to two-hand mashing from whatever position you hold your hands for the bow shot, unless you're really good at switching to that, or you use one-hand mashing, which I don't recommend, you're going to have to home buffer to switch your hand position. And home buffering is slow. You just pause the game. It's time that you're not doing anything. If you go under, the mashing is less lenient. You start lower, and you have to use some of the distance moving forward to get back to the height that you would have already had. But because you're going under the platform, you don't have any potential to interact with the platform. And that means two things specifically. With the angle that we're going to be at, Link isn't going to be parallel to this wall. He's going to kind of be facing like this way. Not that extreme, but he's going to be facing toward that way, so that if we were to hover against this little ledge, Link would slide against it. And that's a huge deal. The precision with hitting this Morth, he's pretty small, and we need to maintain an aim that is good enough so that when we get all the way over there, we'll still be able to hit him. So sliding along this wall is no good. The only way to avoid that with going over is you have to mash quick enough that you just don't interact with it, or that you barely interact with it. So that's one thing. The second thing is that you can, if your mashing isn't consistent and or isn't fast enough for you to be gaining height, there's potential for you to land back on this platform, and then you'll instantly die. So both of those janky interactions with the ledge are not going to happen if you go underneath. So if your mashing can support it, which if you do two-hand mashing, it should be able to, I would thoroughly recommend going underneath. There's no need to home buffer. There's no need to worry about the ledge interactions. You can be confident in your aim. That's why I do it. You can go over if you want to, but that's the advantages and disadvantages to going over versus going under. So now we need to actually aim the shot. It is extremely hard to see in this video. Maybe you'll be able to see it. Let's look at it real quick. The problem is that I have the fire particle on. So I aim the shot, and then I point downward. Oh, this is actually something worth mentioning. You notice I can't see the Morth right now. That's a good visual indicator that you're close enough to him. So when I draw the bow, well, not when I draw the bow. Watch what happens as I go down. You're going to be able to see the Morth spike for a teeny bit, and then he's going to disappear. There it was, behind Link's hand there. I'm going to back up a little bit. This is kind of an awkward frame to pause on. I'm going to go to the game, and I'm going to not use a fire arrow. So the thing about the aim, let's say we're like right here. It's really dependent on how far along, or well, how far along this platform. If he's like over there, then the angle that I need to face that Morth is going to be different. So what I like to do is keep him close to this sort of octagon center main platform. Just because it's less time pushing him with the pot. If you wanted to move him further along, you can, and I think the angle is more lenient because the pillar doesn't get in the way as much. But the visual cue I use is that when I aim up, there's not a Morth up there right now. I could put one up there, but I'll be able to point to it in the video. There's a little orange spike that you can see. His little, just his little tippy top of his spike is going to be pointing up behind that little spot if you've put him in the correct position. So he's going to have an orange spike, and then just to the left here, you can see along the fence there's that little vertical section that connects the two halves of the fence. So what I do is I aim between the orange spike and the vertical part of the fence for how far I move the Morth down. Again, this is about how far down the platform. If he's down here, you're going to need a different visual cue. But I recommend putting him right around here. You don't want it to be right next to the platform. And the reason for that, you can see on this octagon platform, there's kind of like a diagonal slope here. I don't, maybe I can stand on it a little bit. Right here where my left foot is. If you're too close to the center platform, then you can land on that slope, and it'll cause the same problem that hovering against this golden part of the wall will, which is that you're going to get pushed to the side, and your aim is not going to be relevant anymore because your position's now different. So the happy middle ground is like right around here, just so when you fall off, you definitely won't touch that middle platform, but you also don't need to move the Morth as far with the pot. So that's where I recommend putting him. And then for the aim, let me go back and see if I can point out his little orange spike. Oh, it's tough because it's flame arrow. I see. It's a single pixel on the video. You guys see that? There's, I mean, if you do it yourself, you'll be able to see it. Basically, there's just a little bit of this spike, basically this orange spike, poking up right here. So I use that, and then this little vertical part of the fence, I would aim like right about there between them. So that's what I use. This is going to take... Oh, yeah, you really can't see it. So, but if you do it yourself, when you get the Morth up there, you should be able to see his little spikes poking over. That's what I use. And then, after we've got that aim, because we're using a visual cue that's high up, we still need to shoot the Morth that's at our feet, so we have to aim down. There's a couple things you can do to make this easier, because honestly, with the Wii U gamepad, this is pretty tough. What's up, old man? One thing you can do is turn off gyro, so that the movement is completely dependent on your control stick. Some of you that are doing this might even already have gyro off at this point. Some people don't use gyro. Another thing you can do is hold ESS down as opposed to full down. So if I have my bow here, if I hold full... Oh, that's the wrong stick. If I hold full down and my angle's off, I'm going to be way off, and I can't really react to it. But if I hold ESS down and my angle's off, I can kind of adjust as I'm coming down, so I can move more or less in a straight line, if that makes sense. So we can use this pillar as a platform. So if I go like this, You can see that's, and I'm exaggerating a little bit, but if I hold ESS down, even if I'm off center, I can kind of correct it. So they can't see chat. In the VOD, you'd be able to see the chat, but YouTube won't. So yeah, holding ESS down and turning off gyro are ways to improve that aim. I use ESS down. I prefer to have gyro on. I guess you could turn it off at this point because I'm not going to use it for anything else in the rest of the run, but it takes time to turn off gyro. So, and I use it for earlier parts. You know, yada yada. Up to you. If you need that assistance, you can turn off gyro, and that helps a little bit. So we've aimed the shot. We've moved it down so that if we let go, it's going to hit the Morth at our feet. The hitbox is pretty big. You know, the Morth is close enough to you that it's not an insanely precise shot. You pretty much just need to shoot the floor in front of you like I am here. We release the bow. We're going to get knocked back. At this point, actually, let me frame advance. If you're going over and your hand position is such that you need to home buffer, you want your home buffer to be around here. Right, before you've slid off, so that, like I said, you're not interacting with the edge. If you are going to home buffer, you want to do it right around here. If you're not going to home buffer, you kind of just want to start tapping B. And this is a good height. This is the main awkward thing about this attempt of the flame hover, is that you can see I drop height right here, because this is me switching to two-hand mashing. So what I like to do is, during that little interim where I need to go onto the platform, basically, it doesn't really matter how fast you're mashing as long as you can keep height. In fact, rubbing your head against the bottom of that platform will actually slow down your forward movement. So you want to avoid touching the platform. So I just kind of cruise under there for a little bit, and then while I'm tapping it with my right hand, I'm moving my left hand so that I can get into position for two-hand mashing, which is what I do right here. So now I start picking it up. So now we're going to start hovering. If you're... Well, let me make sure I'm on the right. I'm not. I forgot to split. Yikes. If your camera is awkward, you can tap ZL to get it behind him. We're going to be talking more about ZL for the Bowshot, but if your camera is kind of off to the side or something, or it's just not behind Link, basically you want it to be behind Link because we want to make sure our aim for the Morth was where we want it to be. And what we use is Link's model relative to the Morth. So I'm going to let him hover a little higher so you can see. Right there. So you can see that the Morth is like kind of in his hair. Pretty much as long as the Morth is somewhere behind the back of his head, you should be able to land the Bowshot. So that's your visual cue. Really good positions. We'll have him down here, visible between, like, right down here. Because that means he's, like, right in the middle, and that's what you want. So I keep hovering up, and then I want to get to a certain height. We need to get high enough so that we have time to draw the bow and shoot it. So what I like to use is this little black part of the pillar here. I like to kind of have Link's head even with it. You could also have Link's head even with this part. Again, it's not insanely precise. We just want to know that we have enough height. So I hover up there. This is about how high you need to be, maybe a little bit higher. You could actually do it lower, but the inputs are much quicker. You don't have time to react to your visual cue, really. You're kind of at the mercy of how quick you can physically Bowshot. So I like to give a little bit of room. And it actually doesn't matter in terms of how much time it takes, because we have to move all the way forward anyway. So we get up high enough, and now it's time for the Bowshot. So this is the scary part for a lot of people that watch this trick, right alongside pushing the second Morth with the pot. This is arguably the most difficult part of the trick. And I mean that in the sense that it's the most difficult part to get down if you don't already know it. If you do, this is actually not a very daunting part of the trick. And I'll tell you why, is that you can hold ZL during this. I'll demonstrate what that does real quick. So watch what happens with the camera as I take the shot. So you're going to see I kind of lock in because I know that you can see the little black bars on the bottom. I know I'm high enough, so I'm going to hold my height for a little bit, and then watch what happens with the camera as I drop. It follows me. And what that does is it makes it so that the visual cue for the shot is exactly where I want it to be. It's intuitive, right? If the camera wasn't following me, I would have to go based on feel and like depth perception and stuff. But because it's directly behind me, I know exactly when the Morth is at the right height. He's right here. So I took the shot on that frame. So that's why I thoroughly... Oh, Jesus. I dropped the controller, excuse me. That's why I thoroughly recommend holding ZL. Kiba recommends not holding ZL for the fall damage hover, and they're different, but for this hover, I would definitely recommend holding ZL. Just because of this, because it helps so much with consistency. Or not even consistency. It helps with intuition, I guess. It makes the visual cue much easier to understand. And it makes it consistent, because now the camera's always going to be in the same place. So, you know, excuse me for kind of getting ahead of myself, but that's why I would recommend holding ZL. To do that, what you have to do is if you're two-hand mashing, you know, you have the right side of the controller up and in both hands. The left side is going to be kind of, you know, down and off to the side a little bit. What I do is I just kind of, there's no great way to show this. I wish I had a camera or something. I kind of shove the controller into my thigh so that the ZL button gets pressed by my leg. That's one way to do it. That's the way I would recommend if you two-hand mash. Another way you could do it is that you notice I kind of stagnate a little bit here because I know I have enough height. If you're confident enough in your ability to switch hand positions between one-hand mashing and two-hand mashing, you can hover with one hand here, and then with your other hand hold ZL if you want to. And then use your right hand to do the bow shot and then pick your mashing back up. I don't do that. I think it's much easier to just shove the controller into my leg, but if you find that you can't get the leg thing to work, then that's another way to do it. So yeah, I would really, really recommend holding ZL. Like, really, really recommend it. But, of course, you need to actually do the shot first. So what is it that we're doing when we take the shot? We need to do 3 things. So we need to tap the button, we need to hold the button, and then we need to release. So I'll go slowly here. Let me get the mouse out of the way. So I know I'm at the right height. So I'm going to stop mashing and tap the button to get Link to hold the bow in his hand. And then, after I've pressed the button and released it to get the bow in his hand, a second time I have to press the button for him to draw an arrow. But this time I'm going to hold the button. So you can see I'm drawing an arrow. He can shoot at any time now. And then when I get to the right height, right here, I'm going to release the button to shoot the Morth. So those are the inputs. You want to tap the button at the top, and then let go of the button, hold the button to draw the arrow, and then let go of the button to release the arrow. So we'll go ahead and watch that in real time. I'll try to, this might fail miserably, but I'm going to try to tell you when each of those happens. Oh, what's happening there? There we go. I need to go further back. Okay. So, tap, hold, release. Bup, bup, bup. And that's dependent, you know, how long you hold the button is dependent on how high you hover up. This is why it's kind of nicer to go higher than you need to go. You don't technically need to hover as high as I have been. But the higher you hover, the longer you hold the bow, and the easier it is to react to when to release the bow. So that's the bow shot. Oh, whoops, I kind of messed that up. The visual cue I use, I mean, it's hardly a visual cue. That's the thing, like, why I really recommend ZL is because, like, you know, where the Morth is relative to Link is technically a visual cue, but it just makes intuitive sense that the Morth is at the right height right now. You know, like, you can see it because of the ZL. That he's at the same height as my bow, so I'm going to shoot the bow now. It is quick and it is frame perfect, so that does take a little bit of getting used to. But as you do it more, you're going to see that it really is like just a feel thing. Like, it just makes intuitive sense when to release it. You'll get used to it. So we release the bow, and now we need to start hovering back up. So we just took the shot. Now we're in free fall because we don't have a sword in our hand. We need to hover back up. And there's a couple things that can happen. First of all, actually, I want to... Oh, how do I want to do this? So I'll just say that after you take the bow shot, you need to start mashing B again to hover back up. I've kind of set myself at a particular distance here. I want to make sure I'm not... Yeah, okay. So we don't talk about that till later. But we want to hover back up. And there's some problems with the timing. This is much more lenient than fall damage hover, because with fall damage hover, you have to be pressed up against this little part of the platform, and if you go underneath it, then that's a huge problem. So starting your recovery hover too late is not as big of a deal in this. It's not trivial. You still need to, you don't want to fall halfway down Ganon's tower. Like, you're not going to, but you want to start hovering early enough that you don't lose a ton of height. So you can see I pick it back up there. You also, though, this is more important, you don't want to start hovering too early, because there's something that can happen with the way the arrow works that can really mess you up if you do it too early. So I'm going to switch to another video here. So here I am doing a hover. This time I'm on the other side. Like I said earlier, it doesn't matter. And watch what happens. You see the arrow kind of went down into the side there? I'll show it one more time because it's goofy looking. So it's like, alright, I'm about to take the shot. What? It went off to the side. What happened? Let's go frame by frame. This is called glitchy arrow. Yeah, you can see the angle that's coming out there. Perfect. I got the right frame. This is where I want to release. Again, it just makes sense. Like, the height that I am at and the bow is at and the Morth is at, they're all the same. So I'm going to release. But what I did is I started mashing too early. So what Link is doing right now, you can kind of see his arms are down. He's taking out his sword. Because the arrow is true to the bow, like it'll follow the bow wherever the bow goes. Because he, like literally the animation of him putting it in his imaginary belt or backpack or whatever it is that he puts the bow into, him moving his arm down also moves the aim of your shot. So he's gonna... It's so silly how that happens. And it happens a lot. You really have to be worried about this if you are quick with your recovery mash. He's just gonna shoot the bow down. Even though that was the correct frame. Like, that definitely would have worked. Now the arrow's shooting down, and I'm way too close to take another shot. So this is just a failed attempt. So there's glitchy arrow there. And we can see even the red flash because it just hit the ground. So let's go back to the hover. We're almost done here. Almost done. Are you just taking the shot? We do our recovery hover early enough that we don't fall super far, but late enough that we don't get glitchy arrow. You can also even do it if you mash extremely early. You can actually cancel your bow shot. So before Link can release the arrow, you pull out a sword, and he just doesn't take the shot. That can happen too. It doesn't happen as often, because I think you actually need to start hovering before you release the arrow, but it can. So again, just wait a teeny tiny bit if you find the glitchy arrow is happening to you. Just take a brief pause. But we need to hover back up, and as for the height, it's not super strict. We just want to be over the platform. Like we talked about earlier with liftoff, you want to avoid hugging against any wall for the same two reasons. You're going to get pushed to the side, and when you go over the lip of that little wall, there's a chance that you're just going to land on the floor and die. So I'm well over the floor as I'm crossing over where the wall is. So I'm good. We want to be hovering up against this part of the fence at the back. So that's roughly where I aim. I'm good. I have no fears of landing on the floor. So this is a good spot to be. We talked about that already. As for camera, this is something actually, as far as I know, people weren't doing this before I did it. I think people probably do it now, but you know, once we get to the right height, you're going to see that my mashing slows down considerably. I'm just kind of keeping a constant pace, and the camera moves. I move the camera to the side, and this is... So, my mashing slows down. I said earlier, excuse me, while I was going under the platform, if your mashing is good enough with one hand that you can keep a height, which is what I prefer to do. If I need to maintain height, I switch to one hand. Now I have a free hand. I'm going to use that hand to move the camera to the side. And what this does is, you know, if we... Let's do a little experiment here. If you kept your camera like this, and you had to just land on the heart, depth perception is a huge deal. Like, you really do not want to miss this heart, because this is the home stretch. You really don't want to miss it. So turning the camera to the side kind of alleviates our dependence on depth perception, and instead just makes it that, okay, when they're vertically aligned, I'm just going to fall. So, like, right here, this would work. You can wait even a little bit longer. But I know that Link and the Morth, or not the Morth, the heart, are, like, on the same horizontal... I mean, you know what I mean. He's over the heart, so I know I'm good to drop on it. There is a little bit of nuance to landing on the heart. There's some stuff that can go wrong, but thankfully the way this hover is not designed, but the way it works is that we're kind of protected from some of the dangers. So 9 out of 10 times landing on the heart is the better thing to do. What you'll see a lot in fall damage hover is that because the Morth is in the center of the platform and because the mashing is tighter, people don't really take the time to move their camera as often. So they'll do something where they hover really close to the ground, like to the point where their feet are low enough to touch the heart, and then they'll hover through the heart from the side, or from the back, I guess, or from the front, I don't know. You're touching the heart from the side instead of landing on it from the top. That is dangerous, and I wouldn't recommend doing it for this hover. Number one, because it's not necessary. The Morth's always going to go far enough back to where you can get high enough to land on top of it. You don't want to be close to the floor, because there's a chance that you drop your mashing and you land on the floor and you die before you can get to the heart. So there's no reason to be risky about it. The only reason you would want to do that in any other situation, like, if landing on top is a good thing, but if you go too high, and this is more of a problem with bomb hover, if you go too high and you're falling fast enough, there's potential for you to go from, on one frame, Link being above the heart completely, so he doesn't pick it up, and then because of how fast he's falling, the next frame his feet are touching the ground. And so if that happens, you're literally going to land on the heart and not pick it up, and Link's going to die and do his whole death animation on top of the heart. We don't have to worry about that. Like I said, the way this hover is made, we know that we're not too high. If we went too high, we would sail over this fence. This little section here doesn't have collision. You can go through it. So in order to ride up against this wall, we kind of have to stay low. And Link's not going to fall fast enough from this height. So I know I'm safe to drop on the heart. I pick it up. And that's the end. We've picked up the heart. That is the full hover. What's up, Video Freak? There's a lot of intricacy here. But again, this whole video clip that we've been looking at is less than 2 minutes long. So, I'm not saying that you have to think about all these things, but it's intricate, and I think considering them can help you work out the tiny problems. That's why I've kind of made a point to go into as much detail as I have. So that's the meat and potatoes there. That's the majority of the trick. You notice I have a split left here, though. Oh, that's sad. Let me actually go back. There we go. We're going to talk about some extra stuff. We're going to be going over what to do to practice, where to practice, some mentality. We're going to talk about damaging down in your practice, and then at the very, very end, as I said, I'm going to justify why you should always kill the second or the left Morth. You should always stab the left Morth if you have the option for all three. We're gonna go over that at the very end. It's not necessary to know. Suffice to say, stab the left Morth, but we're gonna talk about it because I don't think anyone else has. So for practice, you want to be in Ganon's Tower, or well, the PG fight room more particularly. I always call it Ganon's Tower because it's tall, but it's where you do the Puppet Ganon fight. And the reason you do this is not only so that you have access to the things you're going to be doing the trick with, the morths and the pots and everything, but also because this room is tall. It's gigantic, and so, you know, this is kind of more mashing practice than anything else. Like I said, this isn't a mashing tutorial, but this room is fantastic for mashing. There's a lot of walls and stuff and corners to get yourself into so that you can just infinitely hover. I bring it up, though, because that's also very good for practicing the inputs for the Bowshot. So again, you have to tap, hold, release for the Bowshot. Familiarizing yourself with how much time you can leave between each of those inputs, this is probably the best place to do it. And, you know, you can experiment with holding the bow for longer so that you fall further and stuff like that. It just depends on, or well, that type of practice in particular is useful for the inputs and knowing how fast you can do them. Unfortunately, you're going to have to do pretty much the whole hover setup to practice the particular speed that you need to do it for the Bowshot. That just comes down to practice. That part of it actually works the same in SD. Like the hovering and the Bowshot are the same in SD, including Glitchy Arrow. So if you have access to save states on Dolphin and stuff like that, that's a good way to do it. I think Dean mentioned that that's something he did, and it's a really quick way to get it down. But one other advantage to ZL that I didn't mention is that because it's tracking you, you can see if your Bowshot is too early or too late if you miss it. You'll always be able to see it sail over the Morth or hit the side of the platform. And it's a fire arrow, so it makes a huge display of exactly where it hit. So you don't have to go looking for the arrow. So it's, for practice, I would say start with hovering against these walls. And you can even use the Morths to damage yourself and get pushed off if you want to practice that. Or, you know, if you have bombs or something, you can just use that. Hover up against these walls and then practice the tap, hold, release. Tap, hold, release, tap, hold, release to do the Bowshot against this wall. That's what I would recommend for practice. As for practicing the whole trick, occasionally you're going to mess it up. And you can see I do not have enough Morths to do the trick. The quickest way to reset the room, I've said that a couple times, is to jump down here and go into the warp pot, making sure that you have the top one open. And you can see, when I go in, all the Morths are going to be back, and all the pots are going to be exactly where they would normally be. That's how I started the video as well. You might also notice that I have 3 hearts, and we need half a heart, or a quarter of a heart. Quarter of a heart will also work, but you need half a heart or less to do the trick. So the way that you damage down, there's a couple things you can do. In the room where you kill Phantom Ganon, and then progress into the Grand Staircase, if you go the opposite way, the way that you came from after Trial Skip, there's a bunch of mini-blins in that room. That was traditionally the way that people damaged down before this whole spicy Morth thing was found, where you can damage yourself with Morths. That was how people did it. A lot of people still do it that way. It's convenient because you just kind of stand there and wait. But if you're going for efficiency of time, technically it is faster to damage down with these Morths because they do half a heart each. And I'm not going to be able to do it because I'm actually playing through the OBS preview, but there's something called double damage. So, well, first off... Oh, I guess I was not close enough. There's something called double damage where if you... So, okay. I should explain it first for if I miss it. Earlier on when we stabbed the Morth, he's attaching to us and taking damage at the same time. The thing about double damage is that we normally take explosive damage from the Morth. Is he attached to me? This is so tough. With this delay. You know, the damage that we take to start the hover is the explosive damage at first. But there's also damage he can do while he's attached to you. If he's on fire and attached to you, then he'll hit you again. Most times. Sometimes he'll attach to you and be on fire, and for whatever reason won't do damage. I'm not entirely sure how that works. But if you get it just right, which I didn't, then the Morth will actually be on you, and he'll make you flinch again. So ideally what you want to do for getting down from full health, or from 3 hearts rather, to half a heart, is you shoot 2 of the Morths normally, and then hit 1 with double damage. And now that we're up here, since we have to reset the Morths anyway, we have to go down to the pot. So you can see there's like 2 layers of platforms. We're on the top layer, and then there's another one below us. If we fall all the way down from this top one, we're going to take half a heart. If we fall down from that second one, or even a little bit lower, then we're going to take a quarter heart. So what you're going to want to do is take a half heart. The quickest way to do that is to... Well, maybe this isn't the quickest way. There might be a faster way. This is the way I do it. You roll off of here and then immediately jump slash, because if he takes a half heart, it's going to be like a hard landing. He's going to take a long time to get back up. We don't want him to do that, so we land with the sword. And then to increase the speed of recovery a little bit more, we want to buffer a spin attack, which is slightly shorter than him recovering from a jump slash. So we roll off, jump slash, and now I'm mashing spin, and there we go. We took half a heart, and we're immediately walking. And then we can just hop in here. Sometimes what will happen is you'll miss the Morths, and they will just fall down. You can see there's one down here. He's following me now because he attached to me and I rolled him off. So there's no way I'm going to get double damage, because to get double damage you kind of have to walk into the Morth as you shoot it. But I still can take single damage from him if my walking is slow. So if I need that little bit of extra damage... come here. Then I can also shoot the ones that are down here. So that's that little bit of advice for that. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything else. We use the PG room. We talked about the mentality with the pot. Yep. I think we covered everything I want to cover. I think that's it for the spicy hover. There's my time. There's my there's my overview of the spicy hover. This is much longer than I expected it to be, because the truth of the matter is that there's a lot of things to consider here. If you just watched the clip, you might be able to understand what's going on, but the idea here is that if you're completely clueless, I'm trying to cover all the intricacies. So I think that's about everything I wanted to talk about. There's not like a ton of people here. I don't know if anyone that's here is also curious about anything that I might have left out, any lingering questions to include. But I think we covered just about everything.